Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lorraine Pollock. I'm the Director of Rental Housing Development here at South Dakota Housing. Thank you for taking some time today to be with us. This meeting is a public meeting, which we are asking for your input on the programs that we currently administer for U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, as well as programs that are financed through South Dakota Housing, through the state of South Dakota as well. Today we're going to briefly talk about the programs. If you joined us last month, we spent a little bit more time talking about the programs, and we then highlighted some of the proposed changes that we're going to make. For today's meeting, we're going to just briefly talk about the programs unless there are specific questions, and then we'll go into the changes. So we will have different individuals discuss the programs as we get to the programs, and we're going to go ahead and just get it started. To begin, I would like to have some type of a roll call. I know it gets really difficult when we have this number of people online, but if we can, first of all, I guess, go around the room here at South Dakota Housing. Andy, do you want to start introducing yourself?
Andy Furman, South Dakota Housing.
I'm Tasha Jones with South Dakota Housing.
Scott Rounds with South Dakota Housing.
Mark Lossing with South Dakota Housing.
Chaz Olson with South Dakota Housing.
Lindsay Euchre, South Dakota Housing.
Paul Melhoff, Governor's Office of Economic Development.
Legina Gruce, Governor's Office, Economic Development.
Dave Bondy, Fort Pierce Development.
Karen Webb, Shy River Housing.
Hey, Marty, Shy River Housing. Thank you. Online.
Tracy, Bonnie, Monica, and Kimmy from Care Development.
Fred Bender, District 3. Todd Case, 1st District.
Ed Dickey, NECOG.
Lori Mullen, Grove, South Dakota.
Joan Franken, Costello Companies.
Steve Watson, ISG.
Tracy, you were one of the first ones to introduce yourself. I know you had multiple people there, and I was not able to hear all of the names. Can you repeat who was with you?
Yeah, so this is Kimmy Kier-Noor with Kier Property Management, Kier Development. We've got Bonnie Kier-Herrick, Tracy Theis, and Monica Spangle.
Thank you.
Yep.
And I'm sorry, I'm trying to do this here. Okay, and thank you, Allie. We will write you down as attending as well. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start with the PowerPoint presentation. All right, and again, I apologize. I'm not the. Wow, now we don't have any input. It looks like it's coming back. Okay, I apologize for that. I'm not sure what is happening. So today we're going to go through the 2019 Annual Action Plan as well as the other programs. What is the consolidated plan? Again, this is our planning document. So we, on a 5-year basis, have to redo our document to HUD to talk about our housing and economic development programs. Currently, we are doing annual updates, so this update is for the 2019. This is our report to HUD on the programs of CDBG, the ESG, Home and Housing Trust Fund. Since we do administer other programs that correlate, we actually will have more information in our consolidated plan and annual action plan to encompass these other housing programs. Of course, the purpose is to develop viable communities, and we hear very often in the local communities that economic development is very important, housing is very important, and so this is our tools in order to assist local communities in both their housing and economic development opportunities. So the purpose of today's meeting is to gather input. We had the meeting last month to do the same thing. That was prior to drafting our plan. Some of the comments that we received or the questions that were asked were then formulated into drafting of the plans, and then today we will more specifically go through the changes that were actually made. With this, we're asking you what is working, how can we improve, what are some new ideas to consider, and what additional information we can share with you as communities, as nonprofits, as developers, in order to help you do your business, but also in turn help us do a better job with our programs. And more specifically, what questions do you have? There's a lot of programs that are available, and not always knowing exactly which program is beneficial to your community. We are always here to help answer those questions. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Paul Melhoff to talk about the CDBG program.
Thank you, Lorraine. CDBG program is administered for the state of South Dakota from the Governor's Office of Economic Development. In order to apply for a grant for CDBG, the first thing we look at is what national objective can it meet. There's 3 that they provide for us that is the guidance, benefit to low and moderate income persons. Of our annual allocation, at least 70% of that funding has to go to meet that particular national objective. And then that leaves elimination of slum and blights and urgent need or imminent threat to public health and safety. So once we determine that you can meet one of those, you have our own state program objectives. They need to either promote a rational land use, provide increased economic opportunities, correct deficiencies in public facility affecting public health, safety, or welfare, or increase efficiencies in public facilities affecting public health, safety, and welfare. We added this 4th objective a couple years ago. It's as a way that we can do a little more expansion on some water projects and stuff. As, for instance, as part of an overall water project, we can now include some water meters and stuff on that nature. We don't want those as standalone projects, but we'll certainly look at that when application comes in for that. A couple of highlights about the funding. We have 2 funding cycles, April 1st, October 1st are the deadlines for those. There's a maximum grant amount, $770,000. That gets broken down to $20,000 of that is actually used for your program administration. Covers some of the costs, to hire the planning district to help you walk through the grant process and the project. So that would leave a maximum amount for construction, $750,000. We increased that a couple years ago as well, and that was to help us do a little better distribution of our funding to meet the requirements of once we get an award, it needs to be distributed within 15 months. Those that can apply for a CDBG are units of localized government, municipalities, counties, Sioux Falls, Rapid City, and the tribes are non-eligible for the CDBG program. Sioux Falls and Rapid are considered entitled cities. They get their own allocation of CDBG funds from HUD, and the tribes actually have direct access to Indian CDBG funds, which they can apply for through Denver is where they would need to contact to get a direct grant from those funds. In 2019, we're proposing just some real moderate changes to what we did last year. The primary thing is how we are going to set up our set-aside accounts. Last year we had a $1 million set aside for the BBB program. Those funds were not utilized very well. Actually, we've had 7 applications over the past couple of years. So it's not that the program's going away now. We are just going to request that application for a BBB grant would come in the funding cycles on April 1st and October 1, and then they'll be considered in the entire pool. So that $1 million set aside now will be put back into project accounts for community projects. That's how we are going to look at that. When we get our allocation, we're expecting it to be somewhere around that 5.7 million this year. That is comparable to last year. The continuing resolution that was signed back in February 15th, I believe it was, it's the same amount of money, so now it's down into the formula on how that's going to break down. So that is why we're thinking it's going to be fairly close. It could go a couple $100,000 either way is what I'm expecting. Once we get that award, we take some admin off the top, set aside $500,000 for a special project account, which is primary economic development, and then the urgent need set aside $500,000. Those applications can go out at any time, but it's a discussion between the planning district, our office. When we deem you meet all the requirements that you need to qualify for an urgent need, we will send a letter out to the community inviting them to apply. And generally at that point, you know, it's not a guarantee you're going to be funded, but it's you know, you get to that point, it's a lot of the work has been done. Just want to comment that we did have a few comments that came in. Grow, South Dakota provided us with a couple comments for the plan this year. Just going to want to touch on that we discussed the home buyer down payment assistance grants and have decided that we're going to leave the housing to the housing authority. There's other funds that are out there, albeit, you know, it's always nice to have more money for that type of assistance, but CDBG for the state money is not going to be used for that at this time. Also, there was a comment on, can you use the BBB money for commercial buildings? Technically, no, we can't, because the program, the way we set it up, is for unoccupied, dilapidated houses, is what the intent of the BBB program was. However, really throw a wrench in here. Slum and blight is a national objective, so any building that would be identified, you know, could be a potential project. However, that has been very low priority over the last decades. I can think of one project where we did a removal of a blighted structure, and the thing that really you need to hit on there is it's got to be you know, a real health risk. It's got to be a nuisance. I mean, there's plenty of things that we want to check off. It's just, you know, like, well, we got this building, we want to get rid of it so we can put up an apartment house. You know, that probably wouldn't do it. But if you have somebody cooking meth in the basement and, you know, some crime around it, you know, then you start looking into where that's kind of a nuisance and there's some real safety issues with the community. So we would look at that a little closer. However, we always want to know what the end result is going to be. You know, will it be a green space? Will it be taking down a building to put in a, you know, a WIC program off?
Okay, looks like we were muted for some reason. Paul, you broke the internet. That was a good one, Steve. So Okay, and I apologize for that. It looks like, was it probably about when we switched it over to you? I mean, can someone let me know at what point in time you lost audio? Did you hear anything that Paul was providing in his presentation?
Lorraine, this is Todd in Watertown. Paul dropped off right about, he was talking about commercial buildings and blight.
Okay, thank you. I'm not exactly sure why we got muted. Paul, do you mind?
Okay, no, I can go
From
back
that
to
point
that.
on?
Thanks, Todd. Yeah, that's good, because that was actually one of the comments that we had received from Grow, South Dakota, was to use the CDBG program for commercial buildings. Primarily, that is an eligible national objective. However, the governor's office has not done much with slum and blight in that regard. I think I mentioned there was one project that comes to mind that we did many years ago in Mitchell. We helped with tearing down the old hospital there, the tower building, I believe it was called. And the end result was going to be they were going to move their county WIC offices to that site and build a new building. However, I'm fairly sure that that never got done, so it was just turned into a green space. So we actually had to classify that as slum and blight and could not create it as a low and moderate income project at that point. So those funds are still out there. It's a low priority. We look at a slum and blight request as it needs to really be a nuisance in the community. Needs to be like for instance, I gave the example here, if someone's cooking meth in the basement, or it's crime laden, or got the drunks and druggies hanging out and harassing the people that are on their way to church, whatever it might be. It needs to be a pretty severe case, and it needs to be built as to why we would just come in and tear down a building. I think the run on the money that we do have, which is pretty small, would go pretty quick in that particular category. But it is something that we could look at going down the road too, where you just put a set aside across it. We'll have them, in our notes, and look at that with the new governor as we go forward. If she wants to do something with that, that is a possibility. But for our plan this year, we're going to stick with the BBB program as it was developed for dilapidated homes. We are moving that into community projects. So, we're not going to just take those applications at any time now. They will need to come in on the April and October cycles.
The activity is there. There's just not a separate set aside, and now they'll come through the application cycle.
That's correct. Yep, we're moving those $1 million that we had set aside, the last 2 years. They were very underutilized, and then we just roll it forward at the end of the year. We're just going to put those monies into the project account now, and you're just going to have to come in then.
Question.
Okay.
Who has to own the property to qualify for demo of a qualifying building?
Well, if you're asking as far as for a home, the end result needs to be the city or a nonprofit. As we like to see it going to the city first, and that's the way we set up the program. As far as on a commercial grade building or something of that effect, there we just have to take a look at it and see what it is. Generally it would need to be abandoned, no tax rolls, and the city or the county would end up with it. But as far as tearing down personal properties, I don't see CDBG being used for any of that.
So Paul, I didn't hear your announcement.
So my contact information is good until the end, or till August or April.
Wow.
Let me get this figured out. Till April 8th, I have announced my resignation to my supervisor and have accepted a position with the Central South Dakota Enhancement District. So with many of you, I will still be working, alongside of you now instead of working for you. So I look forward to that. And, I'm a short timer. So if you need to get in contact with GOED regarding CDBG after that, or even, you can start now, put it in your email contacts. Legina Gruss or Cassie Stoser would be the two that you could contact. Phone number the same, that's our office receptionist, and they can direct your call for you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Paul, this is Ted Dickey. Say, first off, congratulations on the move over to Central. Also, I missed out on what the funding was for next year for CDBG. I don't need a breakdown, just overall.
Okay, well, we still don't have that award yet, the announcement from HUD. Based on, what the continuing resolution was that was signed in February, they allocated the same amount as they did last year. So the funding, is going to change at some, their formula that HUD uses, but I don't expect our award to change, a couple $100,000 either way. Probably will be max. So, right now we're planning on the 5.7 million, same as what we had last year. And actually, I believe HUD has 60 days after the resolution is signed to let us know, so we could be hearing those numbers, in the next 3 or 4 weeks at least. Did that answer your question, Ted?
Yes, thank you.
You bet. Thanks, Ted.
And moving to the home program, and I would ask Chaz to take that one.
Thank you. My name is Chaz Olson. I administer the home program, the Housing Trust Fund, and Housing Opportunity Fund. So I'm going to get started with the home program here briefly. Primary emphasis for the home program is housing development, which can be preservation of existing affordable housing, new construction, special needs housing, and also home ownership opportunities. Applicants can be either nonprofit or for-profit. Eligible activities include new construction, acquisition, rehabilitation, or just straight rehabilitation, and that can be for multifamily housing, single-family housing, whether that's home ownership or rental housing. The funding is in the form of a 0% loan, and those forms can be variable. So we do some straight amortization, some irregular amortization. In seldom cases, cash flow, but we are flexible with the way that we structure those loans, and we do generally take a subordinated mortgage position to another funding source. Income and rent restrictions are 80% AMI and below for home ownership activities and 60% AMI or below for rental activities. There is a match requirement of 12.5% of the home amount that you receive, and we hold these in annual application cycle the last business day of August. This coming year, we anticipate around 8.1 million between our entitlement funds, the 3 million that we get every year. We anticipate around 3.6 million in program income, and then about another $1.5 million from leftover funds from previous years. Current set-asides that we have available are the Community Housing Development Organization set-aside. HUD requires that we set aside 50% of every one of our entitlement years for CHOTO activities. So that comes in right around $450,000 every year. With that, we actually haven't utilized the CHOTO set aside for the last 2 years. So this year there will actually be 1.35 million available under that set aside in this August round. We have a homeowner rehab set aside for $750,000, a home buyer assistance program for gap financing for home ownership activities, the amount of $200,000, security deposit assistance, $200,000, and then difficult to develop set aside in the amount of $500,000. And that does need to come in with the application cycle in August. And that's for projects that are difficult to develop, be it for geographical reasons or the tenant population you're trying to serve. It's really kind of on you to describe to us and sell your case on why it's a difficult to develop project. And then also we have a homeownership development set aside in the amount of $500,000 that can be for development subsidy or construction financing. And there's one that's not listed here, which is the rural housing development set aside, and that's $1 million every year, and that's for housing development in communities of 5,000 or less. There it is. The application cycle is due the last working day of August by 5 o'clock, except for the application, the set-asides that are listed there, the homeowner rehab, the home buyer assistance, security deposit, homeownership development, and rural housing development. Those can be submitted at any time throughout the year on a first-come, first-served basis. And more information on all of that can be found in the 2018-19 allocation. If there's no questions on the home program, I will move on to the Housing Trust Fund. Hearing none, I'll move on. The Housing Trust Fund was created under the Housing and Economic Recovery Act of 2008 with funding from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Follow the link there to read the interim rule. Currently it's for housing for extremely low incomes at 30% AMI. There is a option within the rule, the HDF rule, that if the funding exceeds $1 billion, that a portion of the funding can go for 50% AMI and below. That has not happened since the inception of HDF. It is a formula grant. Here in South Dakota, we just received a minimum of $3 million a year per year. We utilize the funding for rental housing only, and there is a 30-year affordability period. It's going to be very similar to the eligible activities they have under the home program. And like home, the HDF income and rent limits are published by HUD every year, and that's separate from the Section 8 income and rent limits. Questions about the Housing Trust Fund? The Housing Opportunity Fund was created via the 2013 legislative session within SB 235, Building South Dakota, with the purpose of promoting economic development by expanding housing. This coming year, we have right around $2.5 million. By statute, we separate that out between 30% of the funding for Sioux Falls and Rapid City and 70% for the balance of the state. This coming round, we'll have just under $2.1 million for housing development and $427,500 available for programs. The housing development applications can be for new construction, acquisition rehab, and also straight rehabs. Program applications can be for programs such as down payment assistance, homeowner rehab, homelessness prevention activities, and community land trusts. And the maximum median income for Housing Opportunity Fund is 115% AMI. There are no questions. Scott Rounds is going to come up and give an overview of the housing tax credit.
Thanks, Jess. Again, I'm Scott Rounds with the South Dakota Housing Development Authority. I administer the Housing Tax Credit Program. Along with that is the Tax Exempt Bond Program. And the Tax Exempt Bond Program can be utilized with the 4% tax credits. So, just a little bit about the credits. Basically, it's an IRS program where developers can receive tax credits, sell the tax credits to investors to get cash equity for their projects. Rehab or new construction. Either multifamily or single-family rental housing. In general, the income and rent restrictions are at or below 60% area median income. We can go up to 80% income now as long as the average of the tenants is at 60% of the area median income. And as SDHDA too, we're also locking those rents at 60%. So you can go up to 80% for income levels, but the rents will still be at the 60% level. For 2018, we had about $3.5 million for tax credits. For 2020, we're estimating about $3,560,000 for credits, and that'll be available. Applications will be due the last working day of August each year, along with the home program application. We generally do those together. Just to go with that, looking into some of the changes that we have on the tax credit program, we do forward allocate our credits. So basically, we're making awards of next year's credits with this year's application cycle. So here in 2019, you'll be receiving 2020 credits for the most part. So to go with that, where we're doing our awards at the end of the year, we used to have a process or a program where we'd maybe set up a waiting list. If somebody did take their credits or something like that, you could get yourself put on a waiting list to see if any credits came available for the end of the year, and then we could award credits to you at the end of the year. It hasn't happened, and since in a long time since we do make those forward reservations or forward allocations of the credits. So we're just going to basically eliminate the waiting list and the additional application cycle from the plan. Just it's not there. If we change things or we find that doesn't happen, then maybe we could put it back in. But it's just kind of administrative change that we're just going to get rid of that section. Next one that we'll be doing, just other changes, whatever that go along with both for the credits.
Not the changes yet.
Yeah, I haven't changed it yet. There we go. Thanks. Part of just some changes to both the home and the credit. Is that where I want to be? Changes for just the home and the credit program. Clarification of service furnished housing in HUD Section 811 requirements. We do have some applicants that are wanting to participate